Hi, I'm Haley Moreno, 28, clutching grandma's scarf at her funeral. Mom angles her phone, fake tears, whispers, bad lighting, take another. Dad scrolls stock tickers like grief has a closing bell. The attorney clears his throat, reads, I inherit 22.5 million. Mom's smile dies. Dad says, no way. Jacob calls me a thief. A video of my grandparents plays. Some of you only loved our money. That night, Mom demands control. I refuse. She slaps me cold. I step outside, text, cancel everything. They thought I'd fold. I was just getting started. I remember being 9 years old, clutching my certificate. I had just won a statewide science contest for building a model. The teachers praised my creativity, said I had a gift for logic. I walked into our kitchen glowing, ready to be seen for once. Dad barely looked up from his phone, muttering, good job, kid. Mom didn't even pause, turning to Danielle with her practice smile. Show them your sketch, sweetheart. This is real talent. This is gold. My certificate ended up shoved in a drawer before dinner was served. Birthdays drove the knife deeper. Mine meant books or discount backpacks. Danielle's meant balloons, backyard parties, and expensive gadgets she only hinted at. I once saved for months to buy a secondhand laptop. Proud, I showed it off, dreaming of coding my first app. Mom barely nodded. That's responsible, Haley. Danielle deserves the iPad, though. Every victory of mine became invisible the moment Danielle breathed. Every loss of hers became a family emergency, funded, excused, forgiven. At 12, I built a homework tracker app for my classmates. The night before the science fair, my file mysteriously vanished. Danielle smirked from across our shared room. Oops, must have glitched. I rebuilt everything overnight, running on sugar and sheer panic. I still placed second, but Mom skipped my ribbon entirely. She was busy parading Danielle's art poster down the next hallway. That night I started a secret journal, recording every slight, every wound. The entries grew thicker as the years stretched. Forgotten birthdays, empty chairs at my competitions, Dad's silence, Mom's golden child speeches. Danielle's sabotage wasn't just childish cruelty. It was deliberate control. I thought if I worked harder, they'd finally see me. But I was wrong. They only sharpened the chains I carried. And what happened at 14 proved they were never letting go. By 15, I had stopped asking for recognition at home. I poured myself into coding, hidden behind a locked laptop screen. The library became my second home, rows of dusty computers humming. There, no one mocked me, no one compared me to Danielle. I picked up small freelance gigs, fixing broken websites, debugging old code. Each job paid $10, maybe $20, but it was mine. I'd walk home clutching crumpled bills, feeling like I'd built freedom. Meanwhile, Danielle strutted into the kitchen flashing her brand new iPhone. Mom clapped proudly. She needs the best tools for her vision. Vision. That was the word they always used for her dreams. For me? Practical, responsible, reliable. Words that chained me, never lifted me. Dad slipped me $20 once, whispering, don't tell your mom. It was kindness, but it felt more like a bandage than love. High school widened the gap. Danielle's art projects got magazine mentions. Mine were footnotes. I built a budgeting app for teens, something classmates actually used, tracking allowance money with simple charts. I overheard my mom laugh, telling a neighbor, she just does numbers. Danielle, she's the creative one, she's my gold. When Danielle failed a major exam, they bought her a private tutor. When I aced advanced math, Mom said, don't rub it in. Even teachers started calling me Danielle's sister. Like my name didn't matter. I carried their groceries, cooked their dinners, washed their dishes. Mom called it pulling your weight. Danielle called it servant practice. At 17, I tried dating. A boy from coding club named Alex. He liked my projects, said I had crazy talent for my age. But Danielle couldn't stand it. She spread rumors I was arrogant, that I used him for homework help, that I trash-talked behind his back. Screenshots circled the halls. Alex drifted away, embarrassed to be near me. I confronted Danielle one night, shaking with rage. She smirked. You really thought someone would like you for you? You're pathetic. Mom overheard and scolded me instead. Stop causing drama, Haley. Danielle has enough stress. Don't tear her down out of jealousy. That night, I swore off seeking validation under their roof. I created an alias, a fake name to publish my code. Every new app, every contest entry, every freelance gig carried that name. Jess Carter became my mask, my shield, my silent rebellion. While Danielle begged for loans to fund her failed art school, I built savings from tiny gigs, dollar by dollar, secret and sacred. By the time she dropped out, I had a few thousand saved. No one knew, not my mom, Not my dad, not Danielle. It was mine alone, my invisible fortress against their favoritism. And I thought I could keep hiding forever, until college forced a choice. College felt like oxygen after years of holding my breath. I landed an internship in Hollywood, shipping features before midterms. For launch night, I saved 3 seats with handwritten place cards. Mom texted, "We'll try to make it. Danielle has networking." The room filled. Cameras flashed. My chairs stayed perfectly, painfully empty. A week later, my supervisor forwarded an anonymous complaint email. It said I stole code and missed deadlines I never missed. A friend in IT traced the IP to Danielle's apartment. When I told Mom, she sighed. "Don't be dramatic. She's fragile." Then the line that never changed. "Danielle's my gold. Be supportive." So I stopped looking back and built a wall of silence. I doubled security, registered an LLC under my alias. Jess Carter signed NDAs, shipped updates, collected small licensing checks. I moved into a studio, ate ramen, learned server costs. Every rejection toughened me. Every payout, however tiny, hardened resolve. Years stacked. Side projects turned into a platform schools actually used. Press blurbs came under the alias, not the name they knew. I kept my head down, sent small payments home anyway, covering utilities so the house didn't blink at midnight. They never asked where it came from. I never offered. Then winter called me back to Portland with a searing quiet. Grandma gone. The harbor gray. The house smelling like salt. At the funeral, Mom angled tears for Instagram between hymns. Dad checked stocks under the pew, muttering about market dips. I clenched Grandma's scarf and stared at the list of pallbearers. After coffee and casseroles, the attorney asked us to sit. He played a video. Grandma and Grandpa in their kitchen. "Some of you loved our money more than our company," they said. "The business goes to the one who showed up to work." Then the numbers. 22.5 million. Held in trust, assigned to me. Mom's smile evaporated like steam. Dad said, "No way." "Mistake." Jacob, my brother, scoffed. "She manipulated them. She's always calculating." I could barely breathe, but I didn't argue or gloat. I just felt Grandma's hand on my shoulder from far away. The attorney slid folders forward. Signatures. Safeguards. Conditions I already met. That night at the family dinner, the masks finally cracked. Mom demanded I sign power of attorney for the family. I told her no. The table went still, knives shining. Her hand snapped across my cheek. "You don't deserve it." The sound rang. The salt air felt suddenly brutally clean. I stood, placed a printed ledger by her wineglass. 45,000 in rescues for Danielle's endless, collapsing projects. "Take my mother's gold and pay it," I said calmly. No yelling, no tears, just the bill and a closed door. Outside, I texted 3 words to every account I covered. "Cancel, effective immediately." By morning, their world would go dark, and mine would finally light. And none of us were prepared for what they tried next. The lights went out at their house before sunrise. No heat, no Wi-Fi, no streaming, no automatic payments. Dad's voicemail arrived first, tight with anger, clipped threats. "Fix this, Haley, or you're done with this family." I drove to the harbor house, unlocked Grandpa's study. Luis, the estate manager, had been waiting quietly months. He handed me a USB grandma labeled "Only if necessary." Inside, emails, transfers, IOUs, screenshots, dates, signatures, totals. Loans to Dad never repaid. Danielle's vendors all defaulted. Jacob's bridge round, wired twice, vanished into ad spend. Denise, the housekeeper, slid me a folder too. Bank statements highlighted. Mom's notes in the margins. She brought agents to measure rooms while Crystal slept. My stomach dropped, but the evidence made me steel. Then the smear campaign hit like a winter squall. Mom posted a teary reel. My child betrayed us. Dad emailed my principal claiming I wasn't mentally stable. A deepfake of Grandma appeared, accusing me of coercion. Brandy, my friend from school, traced the upload IP. Jacob's startup server. Sloppy masks. Audio artifacts everywhere. I called Ryan Hayes, the family attorney, immediately. We met at the long table with allies. Victoria, their advisor, locked every account behind new codes. Anna, Grandpa's partner, warned suppliers about incoming family calls. Luis cued security footage from the funeral afternoon. Mom pocketing silverware. Dad sliding a ledger inside jacket. Jacob tucking a painting behind his coat, eyes darting. Ryan stacked it all into a single clean packet. Harassment, defamation, attempted theft, digital forgery, financial abuse. We filed for emergency protective orders before lunch. Maine moves fast when the paper trail screams truth. Still, Mom tried one more stage with brighter lights. Portland Chamber Luncheon. A plaque for the Moreno legacy. She swept in camera ready, tugging Tom Wheeler to the mic. There's confusion, she cooed. Heirlooms belong to the whole family. I stood and let the room hold its breath. The will is clear, I said. And so is history. Mrs. Larson, our neighbor, lifted her phone like a torch. I saw you steal the silver. Here's the photo. A store manager stood too, voice steady, unshaking hands. We got anonymous emails. We aren't buying your story. Reporters turned. Pens clicked. A camera's red light blinked. Ryan passed me the certified copy of the will. I read the line Grandma underlined twice in blue. To the grandchild who showed up, not the one who posed. Applause broke like surf against the windows. Dad tugged Mom toward the door, jaw locked. Jacob trailed behind, smaller than I'd ever seen. Outside, the news van followed them to the curb. By dusk, the judge signed everything we'd requested. Cease contact, return property. No business interference. Violations would trigger fines, maybe cuffs, certainly headlines. Back at the harbor house, we spread dinner out. Fried haddock, paper plates, salt and lemon on fingers. The team that showed up when blood didn't. I set Grandma's scarf on the chair beside me. Stand firm, her handwriting had said. I finally did. Tomorrow we'd start rebuilding. Clean ledgers, quiet books, real wages. Tonight, I let the harbor breathe through open windows. They'd tried to bury me with lies, and failed. But the hardest part wasn't winning in public. It was deciding what to do with the silence after, which is where the ending and my choice begins. Winter thinned. The harbor turned slate and honest. Court orders held. Property returned. Phone quiet. Dad broke the order, emailed a supplier. Fines hit. His last deal folded like wet cardboard. Mom's reels cried into smaller rooms. Sponsors ghosted. The betrayed mother brand died. Jacob's investors bolted. His startup killed the lights in silence. At the chain, we changed how the math worked. Anna and I launched profit sharing. Checks landed. Crystal would like this, an old cutter said. Victoria sent clean reports, no mystery withdrawals. Denise polished Grandma's silver and stored it. I moved into the front bedroom by the water, hung Grandma's scarf like a prayer, found her note in Grandpa's ledger. Choose family by acts, not names. At school, a girl lingered with bitten nails. My parents say I owe them everything. I circled 3 numbers on a resource sheet. You owe love, not access to your future. We launched the Moreno Foundation in spring rain. Scholarships, stipends, apprenticeships at the docks. 7 kids cried in the cafeteria. I cried too. Mom's lawyer wrote, find healing, share funds. I fed it to the shredder, watered the basil. Dad tried a midnight call from a new number. Blocked. Peace is a boundary, not a flaw. On the chamber pier, Tom handed me a plaque. The paper ran jobs, not drama. I kept it steady. Some nights I hear the slap in that dining room. I let the ocean take it, wave by stubborn wave. Forgiveness is distance plus accounting. I don't hate them, I just don't fund them. If family gets played like a weapon, remember, no is a complete sentence. Protection isn't cruelty, it begins futures. I'm Haley Moreno. I kept the house, the books, the truth. I chose the people who showed up when blood didn't. If you've lived this, tell me below. You're allowed to keep what's yours.
I circled the date on the calendar 3 weeks in advance. A small gold star next to it made the box feel hopeful, not desperate. This Thanksgiving would be different. Not the kind spent watching someone else carve a turkey at someone else's table. This time, I'd be the host, the planner, the reason they gathered. The restaurant I chose sat on a quiet corner of downtown Charlottesville, tucked between a florist and a wine shop. It was warm inside with brick walls and soft lights, just intimate enough to feel personal. I booked the private dining room, ordered place cards, and pre-selected the menu roast duck heirloom stuffing 3 types of pie. They'd like it, or at least they'd show up. I bought thick ivory stationery and wrote the invitations by hand. Dear Mom and Dad. I wrote, even though the words never felt right. I wrote to May and Colton, too, shorter notes, simpler language. Grandpa Henry's card was different. I didn't need to explain anything to him. Just the date time, and at the bottom a small line in pencil. Please come. I mailed them all the next day. The woman at the post office complimented the ink I used. Forest green, almost black in certain light. In the days that followed, I kept the receipts in a drawer by my desk. Checked my email more than I should have. Smoothed out the seating chart again and again. Every little detail was a chance to be visible, to be counted, to be remembered. On Thanksgiving morning, I ironed my dress twice and left the house early. The sun was barely up, but I didn't mind. I wanted everything to be perfect by the time they arrived. The dining room was already set when I arrived. White linens, silver cutlery water glasses lined up in perfect symmetry. The candles flickered like they'd been waiting, like maybe they believed this would be the night something shifted. I placed name cards at each seat. Victor Rosalind Colton, May Henry and Mira at the head, not out of ego, but because the hostess told me that's where hosts usually sit. The waitress brought out the first basket of warm bread, and I nodded politely, folding my hands on the table. It was only 5:15. I told them 6, but still I thought maybe someone would come early. Maybe Henry. I checked my phone, then checked it again. I refreshed my email. Nothing. At 6:05, I walked out to the lobby and stood under the amber chandelier. The maitre d' gave me a kind smile I couldn't return. At 6:20, I stepped outside. The air was colder than I'd expected. I dialed Rosalind's number. The phone rang twice. "Oh, Mira," she said. Her voice was casual, not surprised. "We're already at Colton's. Your foster dad's not feeling great, so we decided it'd be easier this way." In the background, I heard the unmistakable clang of dishes being served. Glasses clinking. Someone laughing. May's voice, maybe. Colton's deeper one chiming in. "I see," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm sure you'll understand," she added before hanging up. I stared at my phone for a while. Not angry. Just still. I went back inside and took my seat at the table for 6. The bread was cooling. The candles burned lower. When the waitress returned, she paused, looking at the empty chairs. "Should I wait before serving?" she asked softly. "No," I said. "Go ahead." I waited a few more minutes, though I knew no one was coming. I glanced at the empty chairs again, as if they might fill themselves if I stared hard enough. Then I folded the menu closed and signaled to the waitress. "Just 1 plate, please," I said. My voice didn't tremble, but my hands did. I pressed them to my lap. She gave me a soft nod, didn't ask questions, and walked away with the menu. I was grateful for that, for not being asked if someone was running late, or if I wanted to wait a little longer. Around me, the dining room had filled. Couples, families, friends. Everyone leaned in close over their meals. I caught pieces of conversation, someone talking about their promotion, someone else teasing their dad for overcooking last year. It was all warmth and easy rhythm. I watched them without meaning to. I envied how natural they looked, as if belonging was just another part of the holiday. The food arrived: roasted duck with rosemary just sage stuffing and glazed carrots. Everything I had chosen with them in mind. I cut a piece and tried to eat, but the bite was dry in my mouth. I forced myself to chew. I stared at the seat that said Victor, then Rosalind, then Colton. I imagined them eating something similar at Colton's table, maybe not as refined, but warmer, louder, surrounded by people who didn't have to try to be wanted. My fork scraped the edge of the plate. I took another bite. It was better not to taste it too much. I kept my face calm, kept my hands steady as long as I could. But something gave when I reached for my water. The glass clinked too hard against the table. My hand pulled back. I folded it with the other. Across the room, a boy laughed so hard he knocked over a cup. His mother just smiled and cleaned it up with a napkin, easy and soft. I looked down at my plate. "Is everything all right?" the waitress asked gently. "Yes," I said. "It's perfect." I was folding my napkin when I heard the door open again. I didn't look up right away. By then, I'd trained myself not to hope. The sound of new arrivals had become background noise, other people being met, hugged, pulled into warmth. Then I heard his voice. "Sorry I'm late, Pumpkin." I turned. Grandpa Henry stood in the entry, his old wool coat dusted with wind. His gait had slowed since last year, but his smile hadn't. It softened the hard shell I hadn't realized I'd been wearing all evening. He pulled out the chair beside me and sat down without needing permission. "You saved me a seat," he said, glancing at the name card I'd written in ink that matched the others. "Of course," I said, trying to steady my breath. The waitress appeared again, this time more relaxed. "Would you like a plate as well, sir?" "Just coffee," he said gently. "I came for company, not courses." She disappeared, and we sat in the glow of the candles I'd nearly blown out. He didn't comment on the empty seats. Didn't ask where the others were. He just looked at me like he already knew. Then he reached into his coat pocket and slid a worn envelope across the table. "I was going to wait," he said, "but maybe waiting's done more harm than good." I looked at the envelope. Its flap yellowed the edges soft. "What is it?" He leaned back and folded his hands. "It's time you knew the truth, Mira. About who you are. About where you came from." My fingers hovered above the paper. My heart began to thud like it recognized something I didn't yet understand. "It's all in there," he said, quieter now. "I think you're ready." I opened the flap carefully, as if anything too sudden might tear whatever was inside. The photo came out first. It was old, maybe from the 90s, slightly faded edges, soft. A woman stood in front of a white railing with autumn trees behind her. Blonde hair pulled back, sharp cheekbones, and eyes, my eyes. The color, the shape, even the tilt of her brow when she smiled. It was like looking at the parts of myself I never saw in Rosalind's mirror. I turned the photo over. In Grandpa's handwriting, Clara, 23 years old. Beneath the photo, a business card. White, simple, clean serif font. Clara Whitmore, founder and CEO, Whitmore Design Group, Seattle, WA. And finally a letter. Folded in thirds. I hesitated, then unfolded it with both hands. "Dear Mira, if you're reading this, then Henry has decided it's time. I've written and rewritten this letter more times than I can count, never knowing if it would reach you, but I've never stopped hoping. I was young when I had you barely out of college. My family didn't approve of your father, and when they found out I was pregnant, they cut me off. I was alone, broke, scared, and I made the hardest decision of my life." I stopped there, my eyes stinging. Grandpa reached across the table and rested his hand over mine. "I knew your mother before all of it," he said. "She was strong, kind, too young to face what she had to. She came to me when she had nowhere else to go." I looked back down at the letter. "I asked Henry to help place you with someone stable. I never imagined they'd keep me away. I never imagined they wouldn't tell you. I've been looking for you for years, Mira, just hoping you'd want to know me. I didn't realize I was gripping the page until it started to crinkle under my hands. She's in Seattle," Grandpa said, "and she's still waiting." Grandpa let me sit in silence for a while. I read the letter twice. The second time slower, like I was learning a language I'd once forgotten. The handwriting was graceful. She didn't beg. She didn't justify. She just told the truth. She came to me when she was 6 months along. Grandpa said, no job, no place to stay. Her parents wouldn't return her calls. I let her sleep on my couch, helped her get through the rest of the pregnancy. She asked me to find a safe home for you. She thought that was the most selfless thing she could do. I stared at the last line of the letter. "I love you. I always have." "Clara, I thought Victor and Rosalind could give you a better life," Grandpa continued. "They were settled. They had a house. They'd been trying to have kids. I thought I was giving you a family, but I was wrong about them. I didn't respond. I didn't need to." He kept going. They agreed quickly. Too quickly, maybe. "Clara signed the papers. I thought they'd raise you with love, with pride. But the first time I visited and saw how Rosalind spoke to you like you were an obligation, I knew something was off. I tried to say something. She said, 'We're doing our duty.' That word stuck with me. I felt something click into place, a quiet truth I'd never been able to name. I hadn't grown up resented. I'd grown up owed. Clara never stopped searching," he said. "When she built her company out west, she hired people just to follow adoption records. Most were sealed, yours included. But last year, she tracked me down through an old church listing. I made her a promise that night if you were ready, I'd give you the letter." I folded the page and slipped it back into the envelope. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I knew I wasn't going to throw it away. "She's not asking for anything," Grandpa added. "Just a chance. And maybe for you to decide what comes next." I didn't tell Grandpa I was going. I needed to do it alone. The drive to Sycamore Lane was short, but it stretched long inside me. Every stoplight gave me a chance to turn around. I didn't. Their house looked the same, fresh paint-trimmed hedges, the porch swing still creaking in the breeze. I parked across the street, took a deep breath, and walked to the door. May's car was in the driveway. Colton's old truck, too. They were all home. Rosalind opened the door. Her expression froze for a second, then settled into something polite. "Mira, what a surprise. I need to speak with all of you," I said. She hesitated but opened the door wider. I stepped inside. Victor was in his usual chair, the news playing low on the TV. May was at the table with a cup of tea, Colton leaning against the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone. I stood in the middle of the room. I know about Clara. Silence fell like a dropped plate. "Clara Whitmore," I said louder. "My mother. The woman who gave birth to me. The one who asked Grandpa to find me a family." Rosalind's mouth twitched. "We took you in. Don't rewrite history." "I'm not rewriting anything," I said calmly. "You gave me shelter, not love. You gave me food, not belonging." Victor shifted in his chair but didn't speak. "You didn't fail me," I said. "You just never saw me. And I don't need to keep waiting for you to." Colton scoffed. May looked away. I turned to Rosalind. "Thank you for the roof. I'll take it from here." I walked out without waiting for a reply. My heels echoed down the steps. The air outside felt sharper but lighter somehow. As I closed the car door behind me, I didn't cry. I didn't even look back. By the time I reached Grandpa's, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The plane touched down in Seattle just after noon. The city stretched gray and misted beneath the clouds, its skyline unfamiliar, but not unfriendly. Grandpa had offered to come with me, but I told him I needed this first meeting to be mine. I arrived early at the cafe near Pike Place, the one Clara had suggested. Small, tucked into a corner with old brick walls and warm lighting. I chose a table by the window. The cup of chamomile tea in front of me had gone cold twice by the time the door opened again. She stepped in slowly, scanning the room. Her hair was tied back her coat neat and long, but what struck me first immediately were her eyes. Mine. Or maybe mine were hers. When our eyes met, she paused. Her lips parted as if words had rushed forward but collided in her throat. I stood. She walked toward me measured and cautious, as if afraid I might disappear if she moved too quickly. When she reached me, she stopped and whispered, "Can you forgive me for letting you grow up feeling unloved?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My throat was tight, but not with anger. Not even sadness. Just the weight of something I'd carried too long finally shifting. So I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her. She was warm, slightly trembling. Her hands clung to my back like she'd waited years to touch something real. "I'm here now," I whispered into her shoulder. She pulled back, eyes wet but steady. "You look just like him, but your voice, that's mine." We sat and talked for hours, nothing structured. No big speeches. Just simple truths traded gently across the table. She told me about design school, about the business she built from her garage, about how she never stopped looking even when everyone told her to let it go. I told her about the attic bedroom, about the Thanksgiving that never happened, about Grandpa's quiet loyalty. When we stood to leave, she asked if I had dinner plans. I didn't. So I followed her out into the Seattle evening, the sound of gulls overhead, her hand light on my shoulder. Clara's penthouse overlooked the water, the windows tall enough to catch the last streaks of afternoon light. The table was simple set for 3. No name cards, no folded menus, just linen napkins polished silver and a quiet steadiness that didn't ask for anything in return. Grandpa arrived just before 5, arms full of rosemary and 2 bottles of cider. He took one look at the view and muttered, "Not bad for a girl who started with nothing but a sketch pad and grit." Clara laughed easy and open and told him to sit down before he dropped anything. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and sage. Clara had made the pie crusts from scratch. I'd helped peel apples earlier, the rhythm of the knife strangely comforting. The turkey rested on the counter, golden and warm. "I think you should carve," Clara said, handing me the knife. I hesitated. Not out of fear, just surprise. I'd never been asked before. Grandpa was humming softly an old tune I remembered from summers on his porch. His foot tapped gently under the table. Clara poured cider into 3 mismatched glasses and raised hers with a quiet smile. We sat. We passed food. No one made speeches. No one performed joy. The air didn't strain to hold something it wasn't built for. It just held us. I carved the turkey slowly. The slices were uneven, but no one minded. Grandpa reached for a second helping before the first was finished. Clara refilled his glass. I caught her watching me once, eyes soft, not full of questions but gratitude. Later we lingered over pie and let the night stretch out. There was no tension in the silence, no need to fill every space. I looked at the table at the faces around it. Every seat was filled. Not out of duty, out of choice. As Clara stood to clear the plates, she brushed my shoulder and said, "You belong here." And for the first time in years, I believed it. I stayed behind to wash the dishes, listening to Grandpa and Clara talk about music and recipes and old roads they used to drive. When I dried my hands and stepped out onto the balcony, the city lights shimmered back like stars. I wrote it late one evening, sitting at Clara's kitchen table while the city glowed beneath the windows. The house was quiet, Grandpa asleep in the guest room, Clara reading on the couch, her glasses slipping down her nose. I didn't write to accuse. I didn't need to relive the years. I just needed to end them. Dear Victor Rosalind Colton and May, I hope you're well. I wanted to say thank you for the roof you gave me, for the meals, for the space I filled in your home. It wasn't always easy, but it shaped me. I've found peace, not in the past, but ahead. I'm no longer waiting to be chosen by people who never saw me. I've chosen myself. You don't need to respond. This isn't an invitation, it's a farewell. Be well. Mira. I folded it, sealed it, and mailed it the next morning. As it slipped through the blue box's slot, something in me settled. Not triumph, just clarity. Weeks passed. Seattle began to feel like something more than temporary. I started working with Clara's design team not as her daughter, but as a contract analyst. Evenings were quiet. My name wasn't yelled across the house anymore. It was said gently, like it belonged. Then, one afternoon, while Grandpa and I were planting herbs in the balcony pots, my phone buzzed. A message from May. "Can you help Colton? Lost everything. Mom and Dad are struggling. No greeting, no warmth, just need." I stared at it for a few seconds, then pressed delete. The silence that followed felt clean. Grandpa looked over at me, saw the expression on my face, and said nothing until I set the phone down. "You've given them enough, kiddo," he said softly. "Now live." I reached for the rosemary and pressed it gently into the soil. His hands moved beside mine, steady and sure. The air smelled of earth and rain and the faintest trace of freedom. The keys were cool against my palm, their weight both foreign and reassuring. I stood just inside the doorway of my new craftsman bungalow, the faint scent of fresh paint mingling with the sharp, clean air drifting in from the street. Afternoon light spilled through the wide front windows, brushing the hardwood floors in gold. I let the door swing shut behind me and walked slowly through the living room, fingertips grazing the polished wood of the staircase railing. Each step I took felt like proof this was mine. My name on the deed, my money in the bank, my choice to be here. 9 years earlier, I would have called my mother to share news like this. She would have told me to take pictures, to describe every detail, and I would have heard pride in her voice. But 9 years ago was before the invitations stopped coming, before the vague excuses and the unanswered calls, before holidays turned into carefully curated gatherings where I no longer existed. That history lingered here, invisible but present, like a faint draft in an otherwise warm room. Buying this house wasn't just about square footage or curb appeal, it was a line in the sand. I had built this without them, in the space they'd left empty when they decided my absence didn't matter. I crossed into the kitchen, resting the keys on the granite counter. The silence wrapped around me in a way that didn't feel lonely. It felt deliberate, chosen. I imagined the coming weeks arranging the furniture, filling the cabinets, planting herbs in the little patch of backyard. This was a beginning I'd carved out for myself, without permission or approval. What I didn't imagine, what I couldn't fully prepare for, was how quickly they would find a way to invade it. There was a time when I was the one who made our family gatherings happen. Thanksgiving menus, Christmas decor, even the silly 4th of July games weaving everyone's preferences into something that felt effortless was my specialty. I called weeks ahead to coordinate, made lists, and made sure everyone's favorite dish was on the table. Back then, it felt like we were a unit. The change was slow, so subtle I didn't notice at first. One Thanksgiving, Lenora told me they were keeping it simple that year, just a few people. The next Christmas, my calls about the dinner time went unanswered until the day after. Soon, every holiday came with vague responses. We're not sure of the plans yet, or it might just be small this time. Eventually, there were no calls at all. Lenora, my mother, had always cared most about appearances. Her version of family was polished and flattering, something you could show off without blemish. I suspect I stopped fitting that picture. My father, Gerald, avoided conflict so completely he acted as though my absence was a scheduling fluke, even after years of it. Darren, my older brother, had a competitive streak that turned even small successes into contests he needed to win. And Sienna, my younger sister, carried herself like she was naturally entitled to more space, more attention, more of everything. I kept trying sending texts, leaving voicemails, asking outright if I could stop by. At first, they'd respond with polite surprise when I appeared anyway, the kind of brittle welcome you give a stranger who stayed too long. Over time, even that disappeared. By the 5th year, I realized I was the only one keeping a finger on the thread that connected us. By the 9th, I couldn't tell if that thread still existed at all, and then came the day that proved it hadn't for a long time. It was the second Sunday in May, and I had convinced myself it would be different that year. I'd called 3 days ahead, told Lenora I wanted to bring her flowers and spend some time together. Her voice had been polite, but flat. Oh, well, okay. Yes. Come by. I ignored the hesitation. I wanted to believe the gesture would matter. I chose lilies, her favorite, the kind that opened slowly over several days. They cost more than I should have spent, but I told myself this was worth it. I wore the soft green dress she'd once said made my eyes look brighter, as if that could tip the day toward something good. The 45-minute drive to their house was filled with small, hopeful rehearsals of what I'd say when she opened the door. But when I pulled into the driveway, the curtains were drawn, and the porch was empty. I rang the bell, waited, rang again. The lilies trembled in my grip as the spring breeze carried the scent of cut grass. I called her phone. Voicemail. Gerald's phone. Voicemail. Darren. Sienna. Nothing. I stood there for 15 minutes before the truth began to settle in my chest like wet cement. The drive back felt longer. I placed the lilies in a vase on my kitchen table, their beauty almost mocking in the silence. I told myself something urgent must have happened, an emergency, a sudden change of plans. That night, I scrolled through my phone, needing proof of anything but rejection. It didn't take long to find it. There they were, Lenora, Gerald, Darren, and Sienna dressed in pastel spring outfits at a glossy downtown restaurant. The caption read, "Mother's Day brunch with the best family ever." A corsage of roses on Lenora's wrist. Not lilies. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Below the flood of heart emojis and compliments, I saw Aunt Celine's comment, "Not everyone at the table." I see, just vague enough to pass as casual, but sharp enough that I knew she understood. I didn't respond. I simply locked my phone, turned off the light, and sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, wondering when exactly my seat at the table had been cleared for good. It wasn't the last time they'd leave me out, but it was the day I stopped pretending I didn't notice. By the time December rolled around again, I'd trained myself to expect nothing, no calls, no texts, no vague invitations that would never materialize. But habits die hard, and that night, after a long day at work, I found myself scrolling through social media before bed. Sienna's post stopped me cold. A perfect Christmas tableau, Lenora and Gerald by the fireplace. Darren's kids in matching plaid pajamas. Sienna front and center holding a delicate gold bracelet toward the camera. The caption read, "Best Christmas ever with the fam." So grateful for these people. I stared at those words until the screen dimmed in my hand. 9 years. 9 years without a single holiday invite. And still, I'd been holding on to the faint hope that maybe this time would be different. I wasn't angry. Anger had burned itself out years ago. What settled in its place was something quieter, heavier clarity. I closed the app and opened my contacts. My thumb hovered for a moment before tapping Allison Greer's name. We hadn't spoken in months, but I could hear her smile even before she said hello. Allison, remember how you always told me to call when I was ready to buy a house? There was a beat of surprise, then warmth. You're ready, I'm beyond ready. We talked numbers, neighborhoods, and timelines. All those years of skipped trips, no joint gifts, and no let's all pitch in expenses had added up, without realizing it. They'd funded my freedom. When we hung up, I sat back on my couch, the quiet around me suddenly different. Not the emptiness of being left out, but the stillness of standing at the start of something I controlled entirely. The next morning, I woke with a list in my head and a steadiness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. I was done waiting for an invitation. It was time to open my own door. House hunting turned out to be less intimidating than I'd imagined. Allison moved quickly, lining up showings in neighborhoods that matched my budget and my need for quiet. With no vacations, no group gifts, no endless family contributions over the years. My savings were better than I'd realized. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every holiday I'd been excluded from had quietly built my escape fund. We saw a few contenders' places with charm, but no soul, or good bones buried under decades of neglect. Then, one gray Saturday morning, Allison unlocked the door to a small craftsman bungalow on a tree-lined street. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, warming the honey-colored floors. The living room flowed into a kitchen with gleaming counters and enough space for me to cook without feeling cramped. 2 bedrooms upstairs, one for sleeping, one for an office. Out back, a small patio framed by climbing roses and just enough yard to plant herbs in the spring. This is it, I said, before we'd even finished the tour. I put in an offer that afternoon. It was accepted the next day. Within weeks, the paperwork was signed. The keys were mine, and I stood in that same bright kitchen with boxes stacked against the walls. That first night, I didn't unpack much. I set up a single armchair by the front window, opened a bottle of wine, and poured myself a glass. The quiet felt different here, cleaner, lighter, mine. I lifted the glass toward the empty room and said it out loud, just to hear the truth in it, to never needing their approval again. The words settled over me like a seal, closing off the years of hoping and replacing them with something far more valuable. And that was when I decided the first thing I'd do here was throw a party. Once the boxes were unpacked and the furniture settled into place, I started making a list not of chores or repairs, but of names, people who had shown up for me, in big ways and small. Friends from college who still called just to check in. Colleagues who celebrated my wins. Neighbors I'd already exchanged warm hellos with on the sidewalk. Aunt Celine was at the top, followed by cousins who had never made me feel like an afterthought. It felt good, creating a guest list without obligation. No shoulds, no unspoken rules about who had to be included. Just the people I actually wanted to see. On the afternoon of the party, the house filled with voices and music. The front door swung open and shut in a steady rhythm as friends arrived with bottles of wine, dishes to share, and hugs that felt like home. In the kitchen, someone was laughing so hard they had to lean against the counter for support. The patio lights glowed against the dusk, framing clusters of people deep in conversation. It was everything my family gatherings never were: easy, genuine, without the constant undercurrent of comparison or performance. Aunt Celine found me refilling a bowl of chips and smiled. "Honey, this is a beautiful party," she said, her eyes sweeping over the crowded room. Then, more softly, "Where's your mother and the rest of them? I met her gaze without hesitation. I didn't invite them. Her brows lifted slightly. Oh, did something happen? Yes, I said simply. For the last 9 years, they haven't invited me to any family holidays or birthdays, so I decided not to invite them either. Celine's expression shifted surprise first, then something closer to resolve. I had no idea. I knew she'd tell the others. Celine was the quiet connector, the one who carried news along the family lines. This time, I wasn't afraid of the story she'd share. Let them hear it. Let them sit with it. The party stretched late into the evening, laughter spilling into every corner of my house. When the last guest left, I stood alone in the quiet, feeling lighter than I had in years. 3 days later, the storm arrived on my doorstep. The knock was sharp and insistent, more like a demand than a request. When I looked through the sidelight, all 4 of them stood there, Lenora, Gerald, Darren, and Sienna clustered together like an advancing unit. I opened the door only enough to speak. "What do you need?" Lenora brushed past me without answering, Gerald following close behind. Darren and Sienna trailed in, their eyes already scanning the place. It was as if my home were a crime scene they'd been called to investigate. "Nice kitchen," Darren said, running a hand along the counter in a way that felt less like a compliment and more like an audit. Sienna wandered the living room, picking up a small ceramic vase, turning it over, setting it down with a faint smirk. "Looks comfortable," she said. The pause waited. Lenora positioned herself in the center of the room, hands clasped like she was presiding over a hearing. "How could you do this to us? Maris, do you have any idea what you've done? Celine has been calling nonstop, and now everyone's asking why we treat you differently. They're acting like we made you an outsider." I leaned against the doorway to the hall, keeping my voice even. "Why haven't you invited me to a family gathering in 9 years? Silence. Gerald shifted uncomfortably, eyes on the floor. Lenora opened her mouth, then closed it again. "You don't even know where I work, do you?" I asked. More silence. They glanced at each other, but no one answered. "I've been in a senior role at my company for years. If you cared, you'd know that, but you never asked." Lenora's lips thinned. "Well, you never told us." I stepped toward the door and opened it wide. "Time for you to leave. I've already done more for you than you ever did for me. At least I'm letting you walk out with dignity instead of leaving you on a porch with flowers on Mother's Day." Lenora's face flushed. And for once, she didn't have a comeback, one by one. They filed out, their indignation trailing behind them into the cold air. The quiet that followed was short-lived. A week later, Lenora came back alone. A week later. There was another knock, but softer this time. Through the glass, I saw only Lenora. She stood alone on the porch, her shoulders drawn in, the wind tugging at the hem of her coat. When I opened the door, her voice was careful. "Maris, please, can we talk?" I let her in, keeping my distance as she stepped into the living room. "I know we haven't been good to you," she began, her tone edged with something that almost sounded like humility. "I want to make it right. My birthday is coming up next week, and I'm planning a small dinner, just family. I'd like you to be there." The words landed heavier than I expected. Part of me wanted to shut it down immediately, but another part, one I thought I'd buried, still wanted to believe her. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Over the next few days, I found myself searching for the right gift. I settled on a silk scarf in a deep teal with delicate silver threads woven through elegant but understated, the kind of thing she could wear without feeling self-conscious. It cost more than I planned, but I told myself it was worth the gesture. 3 days before the dinner, Aunt Celine called. "I just talked to your mom," she said, cheer in her voice. "She told me the good news you're coming to her birthday party." "Party?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "Oh, yes. She's invited everyone, all the aunts, uncles, cousins. She says she wants to prove to everyone the family's back together. I sat in silence for a beat, the realization clicking into place. This wasn't about reconciliation, it was about optics. My presence was just another prop in her performance of perfection. That night, I folded the scarf back into its box and set it by the door, not to take with me, but to return. On the night of Lenora's party, I made myself dinner and stayed off my phone. The sky outside turned from pink to deep blue, and I imagined the hum of conversation filling some rented hall or a too-bright dining room. Around 7. My phone lit up with Aunt Celine's name. I answered. "Maris." "Where are you?" she asked. "Everyone's wondering." Then, muffled. Put her on speaker. A shift in the background told me my voice was now in the room with all of them. I took a breath. "I want you all to know that when my mother invited me tonight, she told me it would be a small dinner, just immediate family. She didn't mention it was a party. She didn't mention she'd invited all of you." A ripple of murmurs moved through the line. For 9 years, I haven't been invited to a single holiday or birthday, not once. And now she wants to pretend we're close so you'll all think everything's fine. It's not. So I won't be coming tonight, and I won't pretend anymore. I ended the call before anyone could respond. The next day, Celine stopped by. Over coffee. She described the aftermath. You could have heard a pin drop. Then people started asking questions why you weren't at Christmas, why you missed Thanksgiving. Your mom said you were always busy with work. Valerie asked where you worked. Nobody could answer. By the time the cake came out, most of the chairs were empty. I didn't feel triumphant. What I felt was steadiness, a weight lifted that I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The silence from my family lasted only a few days before they tried again. In the weeks that followed, I heard from Celine that a few relatives had quietly started distancing themselves from Lenora and Gerald. Some stopped answering their calls. Others made polite excuses to avoid gatherings. It wasn't my doing, it was theirs. The calls and emails from my immediate family came in waves at first, then in drips. I didn't respond. I'd already said what needed saying, and repeating it wouldn't change who they were. Instead, I turned my focus to the life I was building. Work was thriving. I landed a new client that challenged me in the best ways. I deepened the friendships that had stood the test of absence, people who showed up without keeping score. And, almost unexpectedly, I started seeing Adrian, a quiet, sharp-witted man from my book club who listened more than he spoke and remembered small details like how I take my coffee. When September came, so did my birthday. For the first time in years, I didn't brace for disappointment. I hosted a dinner on the patio string lights overhead, good wine on the table, laughter spilling into the cool night. The people there weren't related to me by blood, but they had shown up for me over and over again. As I blew out the candles, I realized I didn't feel the hollow ache I used to. The absence of my family didn't feel like a wound anymore. It felt like space I'd filled with people who valued me without conditions. My life wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and it was mine. I looked around the table, at the faces lit by the glow of the lights, and thought I got the better deal.